Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom.
It is wonderful to have you all here tonight to celebrate Shabbat, to celebrate with this unbelievable young woman who is on the bima with us right now, who has worked so incredibly hard over the last many, many months, and who has a little something going on this weekend. So we are very excited to celebrate with you, Sophia, tonight as we welcome Shabbat, and then again tomorrow as we celebrate your bat mitzvah. And so we welcome all of you who are visiting BTBJ this evening to help us celebrate Shabbat and to help us celebrate Sophia. And we're really glad you're all here. And we will go right into our service on page 4. And I'd like to invite Sophia's parents and sister to come forward to help us light the candles for Shabbat so that we can really begin to create some light, to breathe in the peace of Shabbat, to create even more light in our world and in our community. You can come too. Yeah.
Yes.
Who? Me?
Who? Me? Yes, you. Couldn't be. Then who?
Drive-by kiss. Your part. Yeah, you should breathe 3 times and then cover your eyes. I'll follow you.
Ha'olam asher kishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu v'ha'adlik ner Shabbat.
Amen. Good Shabbos. Thank you for sharing your melody with us. So, Sophia, I'm going to ask you to come over to the middle here, and for all the rest of us to turn to page 5, as Sophia helps lead us in Shalom Aleichem. And as we sing these words, we are welcoming the angels of Shabbat into our midst, into our community, just as we welcome all of you into BTBJ. And may you be blessed as you come in, may you be blessed as you spend time with us, and may you be blessed as you go out.
Shalom Aleichem,
Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon, Melech, Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Boachem L'Shalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon, Melech, Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Baruch Hu L'Shalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon, Melech, Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Seichem L'Shalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon, Melech, Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
Thank you, Sophia. You can have a seat if you'd like. And I'll ask all of you to turn to page 10 as we continue on the top of the page with Yedid Nefesh.
Yedid Nefesh Afarachaman Meshoch Avdach El Ritzonach Yarutz Avdach Gemur תתחזק ותתרפא והייתה לך שפחת עולם.
We continue on page 14 as we move into Kabbalah Shabbat, and this section of the service is intended to really help us prepare for Shabbat, to settle in, to take a nice deep breath. Some of us have traveled from near, some of us are joining us from afar. And just take a breath because you have arrived. At the red arrow, we read, "The heavens shall be glad and the earth rejoice." And we are reminded to look back and appreciate all the joy that we've experienced this week, even as we're creating even more joy this Shabbat. And so I want to ask all of you if there was something particularly joyful that happened in your week that you would like to share with the rest of us so that we can carry that into Shabbat together. I invite you to share with us.
You got promotion and a raise.
Awesome! That's huge! Congratulations, Glenn. Well deserved, I am sure. I was going to say, you might have some bills coming up, so that's a good thing. Well, top that, everyone. I don't know. Any other joyful moments? Nancy?
I just found out this afternoon our son got the internship.
Yay! Mazel tov! Some of us are starting out in our careers, and some of us are moving on up. But that every step of the journey is an exciting one. You got to start somewhere. So, Mazel tov. That's very exciting.
She's a funny person. Every item on the checklist has been checked.
Yeah.
I'm shocked. Mazel tov. That's a very good feeling. Now you can just put the list aside. You don't have to look at it again.
It's right now it's hanging on our door. There's 2 pages of white paper hanging on our door.
I feel like we need to just take a picture of you next to that at some point, just so that you can really fully appreciate all that you accomplished.
And so that you
I'm
remember
not-
all that you have accomplished.
Exactly.
Laura can attest. She's like, what is that list?
You can stand on a ladder so that you can. That's great. Any other joyful moments that
Sure.
we've experienced? Cantor Benjamin.
I had lunch with my dad yesterday for the first time since before my wedding,
Uh-huh.
which was a couple weeks ago for anyone who is not aware. And it was a joy to sit and chill with him and to just bask in the glow of
Yeah.
everything that had happened
Yeah.
and to be able to enjoy his company.
Amen. So he doesn't live locally, so that's especially sweet, since it's
No,
not
he
something
schlepped
that
up
can
from
happen all the
Annapolis.
time. And that is such an important moment, since and I think for you guys as well, Alana, I hope that you can have that moment, after tomorrow, where you can kind of sit down, look at that list, look at your family, and that you can all really appreciate what just happened. And so, the joy doesn't just come from achieving the thing, from getting the internship, from, being told about the job or whatever it is. The joy also really is, kind of continues to grow and to really be appreciated as we allow that to sink in. And that's such an important piece of all of that it can be so easy to forget because we just are okay, we're done. Throw out the list, create a new one, and on to the next thing. But that's such an important piece of it. I'm so glad you got to do that with your dad. Well, I will share, if Dolly is not going to share, that at her school today was a very special tradition, which Nancy knows, she was there. It was Blue Gold Day on the girls' side and Blue Blue Day on the boys' side, which is kind of it's a new tradition that they both happen on the same day, but it's a very long-standing tradition in the school. It's like a little bit of like a color war kind of experience. But it was, seeing all the parents there this morning in the freezing cold at the end of April, everyone just kept commenting how nice it was to be able to have that kind of experience again. A couple of years ago they did it, but no parents were allowed. Last year it was also a little bit different, and so this was the first year that we were all really able to be there, and it was, outside and all celebrate with one another. And so to see the excitement on all of the kids' faces at having, such a normal part of childhood, which feels like not a big deal when you're going through it, but also to be able to have this like school ritual which feels really important, and like seeing the seniors get to kind of have their moment, and they like it's huge. So getting to experience that with them and for them, for all of them, was a joy. So I hope whatever it is that you shared, and anything that maybe you didn't share, I invite you to continue to think about it and maybe share it with your loved ones later. But we take all of that with us into Shabbat as we sing Yismechu on page 14.
Yismechu Hashamayim, Yismechu Hashamayim, Yismechu Hashamayim, V'tagel haaretz. Yismechu Hashamayim, Hashamayim, Yismechu Hashamayim, Hashamayim, Yismechu Hashamayim, V'tagel haaretz. Yiram hayam, Yiram hayam, Yiram hayam umelo. Yiram hayam, Yiram hayam, Yiram hayam umelo. Continue on page 16, 4 lines up from the bottom in the Hebrew and in the transliteration. Or zarua latzatik, o yishrei lev simcha. Or zarua latzatik, o yishrei lev simcha. Or zarua latzatik, o yishrei lev simcha. O Yisrael lev simcha, O zarua latzadik, O Yisrael lev simcha, O Yisrael lev simcha.
Turn to page 23 as we get ready to move into Lecha Dodi. And as we sing these words, we are welcoming Shabbat as if we are welcoming a bride. Kenner Benjamin knows a little something about that. And it's that same kind of anticipation that we're supposed to feel. And so sometimes, as we said, these big moments require some preparation. And so we know this when we're celebrating a bat mitzvah or when we're celebrating a wedding, that we don't just sort of like get up and decide to do it, or most people don't anyway. But there's some preparation and some decisions and some planning that goes into it. And, Shabbat comes every week, but at the same time, there's a lot of planning and preparation that can go into that as well. And so if we, are making dinner or sharing it with friends, if we're cleaning the house, if we're having guests, that's one kind of preparation. But there's also a kind of preparation that each of us can take on to really prepare ourselves, to allow ourselves to open up to the peace of Shabbat and to that sanctuary and time that Shabbat is. So I just want to invite you for a moment to just take a nice deep breath. And allow yourselves to really settle into this moment and to open up to the joy and to the peace of Shabbat.
Lecha dodi likrat kala, Pnei Shabbat
מקור הברכה, מראש מקדם ניסוחה, סוף מעשה במחשבה תחילה. לך, דודי, לך דודי לקראת חלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת חלה, פני שבת נקבלה. מקדש מלך עיר מלוכה, קום יציאי מתוך ההפכה, רב לך שבט בעמק הבכה, והוא יחמול עלייך לה. לך, דודי, לך דודי לקראת חלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת חלה, פני שבת נקבלה.
We turn to page 25 for the last two verses.
ימין ושמאל תפרוצי, ואת אדוני תריצי. אל יד איש בן פרצי, בן משמחה ונגילה. לך, דודי,
לך דודי לקראת חלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת חלה, פני שבת נקבלה.
I invite you to rise and face the door as we welcome the Sabbath Queen.
בריא ושלום עטרת בעלה, גם בשמחה ותוך עולה, תוך אמוני עם סגולה, בואי חלה, בואי חלה. לך, דודי, לך דודי לקראת חלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת חלה, פני שבת נקבלה.
You may be seated. You too. We continue on page 27 with the Psalm for Shabbat.
מזמור שיר ליום השפט, תודה לאדוני, עוזר ישמך ויום יגברך בברכה צדיק אתה אמר יפרח, כארץ לבנון שתולין בבית אדוני בחצרות אלוהינו יפריחו עוד ינוחון בשיבה דשנים ורעננים יהיו להגיד ישר אדוני צורי צורי ולא עוולת הבור.
We turn ahead now to page 39. And I will invite you to rise if you are comfortable and able to do so as we move into our evening service, our Mari service with Baruch.
Baruchu et Adonai HaMevorach.
Baruch Adonai HaMorach Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Le'olam Va'ed.
You may be seated.
מעביר יומי ללילה, מבטיח בין יומי ללילה, אולי צבאות שמו, אל חי וקיים, תמיד ימלוך עלינו לעולם ועד,
Baruch atah Adonai, Amalim Aravim.
We continue on page 40.
Ahavat Olam Bet Yisrael, Amcha Avta, Torah u'mitzvot, Chukim u'mishpatim, Otanu limadeta. Aten Adonai Eloheinu, B'shalchenu uvkumeinu, Nasiach b'chukecha, V'nismach b'divrei Toratecha, Uv'mitzvotecha, li'olam va'ed. Ki hem chayenu li'orech yameinu, li'orech yameinu. Uvahem neheh yomam v'layla, yomam v'layla. V'yamarcha d'sirut mehu l'elamim, Baruch Adonai, Ohevam bo Yisrael.
We continue on page 41 as Sophia leads us in Shema and V'ahavta.
Shema
Shema Yisrael,
Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Hashem kavod machotav le'olam va'ed. V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavecha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol meyodecha v'chayu hadvarim ha'ele asher nohim mitzavecha hayom al levavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam v'shivtecha b'veitecha u'v'lachtecha b'derech u'shofbecha u'kumecha u'shartan liod al yodecha v'hayu l'totafot bein einecha u'vtaftam al mezuzot beitecha u'b'sharecha.
silently on page 42.
Adonai Elohechem emet.
We turn to page 44. Sophia, you are welcome to have a seat if you'd like, but you're also welcome to sit up here. It's up to you. Happy to have you as much as you'd like to be here. We continue on the top of page 44.
U'malchuto b'ratzon kiblu alehem Moshe u'Miriam v'nei Yisrael l'chanu shira v'zimcha rabba v'yamru cholam mi'chamocha ba'elim Adonai mi'chamocha nedar b'kodesh nora tehilot sefer. Malchutecha ruvanecha b'ke'em lifnei Moshe zelion v'yamru Adonai yimluch li'olam va'ed v'nemar yivada Adonai et Yaakov u'galom yad chazak mimenu Baruch atah Adonai gam Yisrael.
We turn to the top of page 45 for Hashkivenu, which is a prayer that we say every evening, in which we pray to God to allow us to sleep peacefully at night. How refreshed do we feel in the morning when we can do that in safety and comfort and warmth with protection, and to awaken us to life again the next day. And we know that there's so many in the world that can't do that comfortably for one reason or another. Those who are ill, who might be in need of a little extra peace, protection, and healing. Those who are unfortunately caught in the war in Ukraine and who are fleeing for their lives. Every story I hear is just unbelievable. The folks who own the studio where Dahlia takes piano lessons shared a story of one of their family members. Her husband's from Ukraine. And the story of how they were able to get out and find safety is just, every story is miraculous. And so we pray for peace and protection in that part of the world as well. And so I invite you as we move into this prayer and we say, Ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha, and we ask for God to spread over us a canopy of peace. We also pray that that canopy of peace will be spread out over all those who are in need of a little extra, whatever it might be, healing, peace, protection in this moment. And we also recognize the ways that we might be able to be that kind of comfort and source of peace for others. And so to also find ways that we can create more goodness in the world. So I invite you to join with me for those 4 words, Ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha. And as we do this, if you want to close your eyes and hope that our prayers and our energy can sort of find its way to wherever it's needed in the room or in the world. Ufros aleinu sukat
Sukat shalom aleinu, ya kol amo Yisrael, ya Yerushalayim.
Turn now to page 46, and Sophia will join us again on the bima for Vishamru.
Vishamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat Lasot et ha-Shabbat L'doratam b'rit olam Beini u'bein b'nei Yisrael Oti le'olam Oti le'olam Oti le'olam Vishamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat Lasot et ha-Shabbat L'doratam b'rit olam Sheshet yamim asa Adonai et hashamayim v'et ha'aretz Vishamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat Lasot et ha-Shabbat L'doratam b'rit olam U'bayom hashvi'i Shabbat vayinafash Shabbat vayinafash Shabbat vayinafash Vishamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat Lasot et ha-Shabbat L'doratam b'rit olam Yikara v'ikara shmei rava V'yomadi kirte v'yamlich machute V'chayechon u'yomechon Uv'hayedocho be'Yisrael Ba'agala Uv'izman karib V'yimeru Amen Yehi shmei rava mevorach V'yach v'yishava v'yapa'ar v'yadroma v'yatnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaled v'yitalal shemei kedusha Rechu Elam Yichu Tabachirata Tushbechata v'nechamata Tamiran Yama V'imaru Amen.
We turn to page 47. I invite you to rise if you're comfortable and able to do so for our Amidah. In the evening, our Amidah is silent. And so I'll invite you to move through from pages 47 through 52, either in the words in Hebrew or in English, or to just take a moment for your own personal quiet prayers. We conclude our Amidah with Oseh Shalom, a prayer for peace.
Oseh Shalom Bivromav Uyaseh Shalom Aleinu V'yakol Yisrael V'imru Amen Yaseh Shalom 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 Aleinu V'yakol Yisrael Yaseh 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 Shalom Shalom Aleinu V'yakol Yisrael V'imru Amen.
You may be seated. We continue with Kaddish Shalem on page 54.
יגדל ויגדל שמנו בה,
אמן.
יעמד יברח ירצה וימליך מלכותה, וחיי כל יום אחד, ובחיי לכל בית ישראל, בעגלה וזמן קריב ימלאו, אמן. יהי שמירה ברוח, יום ימי המאיה יתברך, יתברך כפי שבח, ויתפאר ויתרום וינשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתעלש מגורשה בריחו, לילה מכל ברכות וישורת תדוש בחדה ונחמה תדע מהרה מיומה ויאמרו, אמן. תקבל צלות הודו ויתכון לכל ישראל, כבוד אב והודו וישמע ויאמרו, אמן. יהי שלום רב v'shamaya v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Osei shalom v'rama v'yasei shalom. Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen.
Before we continue with our Kiddush, I have some questions for all of you. First, what does spirituality really mean? Little questions. What does it mean to have a spiritual experience? One of the topics that came up a number of times in my interview here at BTBJ and in the congregational survey that Alana helped to organize is a desire for increased spirituality at BTBJ. And I am quite moved by this desire, which I have shared with many of you already. And I also share a craving for the spiritual. I also know that spirituality means different things to different people. So as I hear this from our community, I wonder, what does desiring more spirituality mean for each person in our community who expressed this desire? Is spiritual connection something to be achieved in services, like we're doing right now? Is spiritual inspiration something to be experienced during opportunities for learning or study? Something we talk a lot about, and that we're already planning for next year. Is a spiritual high something to be felt in moments of communal gathering, like the gala that a lot of us are coming back to on Sunday night, where we'll all get to kind of be here in this space together? Or is spiritual awe something to be struck by in a walk shared in the woods, or when your breath is stolen by the view from the top of a mountain? Maybe it's some of these things, maybe it's all of these things, maybe it's none of these things. And so I want to ask all of you, if spirituality is something that you seek or something that you have found, and I don't assume it is for all of you, what has this looked like? I'd love for you to share that with us. Just one. Mindy.
For me, it's a direct relationship to God or the divine force that has foundations in our religion, but certainly in the context of all great religions and on nature and everything. So it's more about feeling a personal connection to that that's not necessarily related to any outside experience that is like sort of dictated or indoctrinated.
Uh-huh.
You know, it's like religion serves a pathway
Great.
into that relationship, but it can be found through a myriad of opportunities.
Okay, so it's like a closeness that we experience either sort of by means of or in the context of religion and community, and also more than that. It could be also found in other moments and in lots of religions, and we all have our own pathway and language and traditions that hopefully can sort of enable that in us, but it's that kind of closeness, that connection that you're saying. Awesome, thank you. Thank you for being brave and going first. Alana.
So, as I was listening to your list, I thought yes, right? Because I think there's moments, but I was thinking of an example for myself that growing up for Rosh Hashanah, there would be multiple people blowing the shofar. And for me, closing my eyes and hearing and being in the community, and I remember as a kid, and I feel this way as an adult, that sort of surrounded by that is a very sort of a spiritual experience to me, and I look for that type of feeling in different ways and places. And sometimes I feel that way when conventions things too.
Yeah.
There's something that really, that sound of the music really evokes for me.
Yeah.
That feels very connected to something bigger than me.
Okay, so also the sort of feeling of being connected to something bigger, and very much in the context of religious practice, experience, tradition. And I feel like even in your body language, there's sort of like an elevation that you're sort of feeling in that moment that might come by means of music or by means of this sort of sound that really kind of envelops you and kind of like you're just sort of lost in it, which is, yeah. Anyone? So I want to encourage all of you to be thinking about this, even if you're not sharing aloud. Isabel.
I will share. The question evokes like moments in life for me that like range from kind of classically religious to like really not. I so I'll share quickly three. So one, which I think I find like most accessible. As some of you know, I run the trails in Wissahickon, and there is something about just like the heightened senses when you can like feel your body pumping and smell the like all the smells of the Wissahickon and hear your body on the ground and the birds chirping and also feel like a little bit alone when the trails aren't packed. So like that feels spiritually palpable for me. But I also have like really strong memories of being sitting at Shabbos dinner like in my 20s with people I knew, people I didn't know, and like singing after the meal in these like tiny, cramped, almost dining rooms in our, group for, little apartments, all shared family people. Like that felt real. Something in the cacophony of kind of maybe nice voices, maybe kind of crappy voices, people who like really felt connected and satiated with food. And then the last one, because when Alana was speaking, it made me think about like, my own childhood high holiday experiences. And there was a member of our community, not a rabbi, who leads Musaf. Normally, like I talk about him all the time during as well. And I have these incredibly strong memories of him singing Hineni, which is traditionally started at the back of the room. And so even though I knew who was singing, you can't see them at first. And there's some, like I can still hear him. And that it brings me to such a place of calm and openness. And all of those feel important for my own spiritual heightened senses and calm and
Yeah.
connection and all of it.
Yeah. And there's like something, I mean, on the one hand, there's something about, the solitude and being alone and the way that we can kind of connect in those moments to something, either both within and outside of yourself. There's something about being in community, and whatever that community is, either like a very familiar, comfortable community, like home, shul, whatever, or just with whatever random guest happened to be there that night, but that's community in that moment, and being able to come together there. And also some of the mystery of our ritual that does something, whether or not we realize that it can or it will or it should. Sometimes it just does, and sometimes it does every time, year after year, and sometimes it sort of catches us off guard, and it's like, oh, that just happened, and with doing this thing that we've been doing as a people for however many years it's been. And as you were talking about being in the Wissahickon, I think something that I was also thinking about is that there's something for me as well about those individual moments of like the walk I'm taking today, and what I'm feeling in that moment, and then the way in which all of those moments kind of build and add together, and thinking about what it's like in the spring, thinking about what the trees look like in the winter, thinking about how it changes in the fall, and thinking about how all of that is also sort of all wrapped up in any one of those moments to sort of feel the fullness of all of them. So there's a lot of, thank you all for sharing. I think there's some similarities and some differences in what we got, and I hope the rest of you are thinking about this question.
Can I jump in?
Oh,
for the
yeah.
last moment? So,
Please.
speaking of Hineni, one of the most surreal and weird moments that I never thought I would ever experience was in the fall of 2020, where Hineni literally means here I stand before you, God, as a representative of the community. And fall of 2020, there were about 9 people in this room. And to make that long walk up from the back doors all the way up here with nobody else really in this room was a pretty surreal experience that I never thought in my life I would ever have. But it really hit me, with the pandemic being in full blast right before we, right before the vaccines were released and everything, and to feel that moment in in those high holidays was
Yeah.
surreal, and something that it really hit me. Hineni, here I stand
Yeah.
as a representative of the community, that God willing, I will never, ever have to experience again in my lifetime,
Yeah.
because, to do it in an empty room, with everything that was going on at that point in our lives,
Yeah.
but to really have those words hit you in a way that you never thought they ever would really meant something.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and I'm sure that's a way that, those who canonize those words into our liturgy never thought would happen either. And yet there we were, figuring it out. And I'd be curious to also hear what that has meant for you since then, saying it again. So we can talk more about that. Because once you have that experience, it is, again, sort of like being in the Wisik and in the seasons, they're all then overlaid. And so there's something about that too. So our Parsha this week, Acharei Mot, which Sophia has spent some time with, begins with these words. Vaydaber Adonai al Moshe Acharei Mot, Shnei b'nei Aharon, b'korvatam lifnei Adonai, vayamutu. God spoke to Moses after the death of the two sons of Aaron, who died when they drew too close to the presence of God. This line references a tragic event that occurred about 6 chapters ago in our Torah, in Parshat Shmini, when Aaron's sons, Nadav and Avihu, brought what is described as an alien fire to God. When they did this, they died instantly. Even though commentators have spent thousands of years debating exactly what it was that Nadav and Avihu did in that moment that was considered to be so terrible that they couldn't just be punished, they had to die, our text from this week's Parsha simply explains that they drew too close, b'korav tam, before God. The root of this word, b'korav tam, every Hebrew word has a root. The root of this word is kuf resh vet. And the sacrifices that we are instructed to make to God all throughout Leviticus, we get a lot of instructions, they're referred to as korbanot, which has the same root of kuf resh vet. And so while we translate korbanot as sacrifices, items which will be burned on the altar in lots of different ways, we get all sorts of instructions for those, the root of the word explains why it is that we're engaging in these actions in the first place. The purpose of the sacrificial system is so that we can draw close, karov, to the presence of God. And whether we're drawing God's presence closer to us, or we're drawing ourselves closer to God, the goal is to draw near, to create that closeness, to achieve an intimacy from one to the other. And when this closeness is achieved, if even only for a very brief moment, one might say that this is a spiritual moment. The many laws and structures that are put in place in our tradition, particularly throughout the book of Vayikra or Leviticus, are meant to explain how it is that we can be bringing korbanot so that we can create and maintain this relationship or closeness with God, so that we can maintain a state of holiness among our community, and so that we can continue to create spiritual moments among us. But our text is quite specific about how and when this should be done. Nachmanides teaches that the reason that we receive the reminder about what happened to Nadav and Avihu at this moment in our text, as we're going into this parsha, is so that Aaron knows that he must only serve Adonai when and where he is commanded to do so. He receives this instruction not because he could somehow have forgotten what happened to his sons, that shocking, tragic moment that happened to him, but rather to help him understand how to avoid a similar fate. He may have thought that as high priest, that he could somehow make sacrifices anytime. He was kind of like the big kahuna there, literally. That he could walk into the Holy of Holies, the most sacred place in the Mishkan at any moment, and that his status as high priest, or this like VIP in the community, would somehow offer him unlimited access to God. But Torah teaches that that's not the case. Even for the high priest, spiritual ecstasy, divine intimacy, isn't accessible at every moment of the day. And maybe, just maybe, there is such a thing as too much of a good thing. That easy, indiscriminate access cheapens the importance and elevation of the experience, and that even Aaron could begin to take it for granted. And what was once produced spiritual awe, that kind of moment for him and wonder, would, if it would happen too much, it could become mundane. As mundane as if we were to clock into work each day or walk our dog around the block. We do it without thinking, and we don't really appreciate what's happening. In our parsha this week, we read about the expiation ritual that the priests were to perform only once a year. And this was what we do on Yom Kippur, and we read this again during Yom Kippur. So this text that we read this week, and that actually we've been reading for the last 3 weeks, if some of you have been coming to Thursday Minyan, because the way that our calendar fell with Chag on two Shabbatot during Pesach means that we've actually been stuck in a holding pattern for our regular kind of cycle, and we've been reading Acharei Mot every single week. Could you imagine? We've been reading this every Thursday, and now finally we get to read it on Shabbat. So we've been reminded of this a lot lately as we've been moving through Pesach, and this very important ritual that it describes. So it was the job of the priests to perform all the rituals that were brought by the community, all the sacrifices. And so whether they were sacrifices of celebration, like, we're told to bring sacrifices at the different points in the harvest, hopeful sacrifices that are in gratitude, or whether they're sacrifices for atonement for something that we did wrong. Day in and day out, this is what the priests were doing. They were dealing with all of these korbanot that were coming to them. But with the instructions that we get this week, there's a recognition that even with all of these korbanot that are somehow meant to kind of create and maintain holiness in the community and healing and all of that it was also quite likely that there was some tum'ah or some kind of icky spiritual residue that was left behind even after all of the cleansing that happens. And there's a lot of cleansing that's happening, right? There's a lot of immerse in water, bring the sacrifice, wait till evening, all of these things that are happening. So I think of it kind of like when I try to clean my stovetop, and no matter how many different products I use, and no matter what I do and how many hours I spend, somehow there's still a little grime left in certain places that I can't figure out how it got there and then how to get it off. But nothing I can do seems to get it clean. So once a year, we have a spiritual ritual, a special ritual, in which the priest will cleanse himself first. That's a very important piece. And then the priest will cleanse the entire temple. And these rituals were kind of like the super duper Passover cleaning that some of us might have done recently, to get a really deep clean in the temple so that this whole process can start all over again. And it is meant that, but for the priest, rather than cleaning all the physical gunk like we might be doing, this ritual was meant to clean away all of the bad spiritual juju that somehow kind of accumulated in the temple for whatever reason. Maybe there was someone who didn't bring a sacrifice, but they did something bad. Or maybe it didn't work the way that it was supposed to. Or maybe someone forgot that they were supposed to do it. So for whatever reason, stuff was sort of building up in the temple. And we also know that even with our Passover cleaning, with everything that we do, with all of the care and attention we might give it, that even there's a recognition at the end of the day that maybe we missed some crumbs. That we try to get under the cushions and in our car and everything, but we acknowledge at some point, as Passover, as the first Seder is approaching, that we can nullify them with a blessing and then move on. Whatever you didn't get, it's okay. Take a deep breath and go enjoy your Seder. So, given that we're acknowledging the fact that even with this entire whole system of sacrifices that we're given all throughout our Torah, that still even with that, some spiritual gunk might have still been left behind, one might read this text and think, why should I only do this once a year? Maybe it would be even better than doing it once a year to maybe do it once each season. Or if we really want to kind of make sure that our temple is clean and everyone's ready to go, maybe we should even do it every week. That we could really, spend a lot of time trying to do this cleansing to keep ourselves in tip-top spiritual shape. But our Parsha, even in this very first line of this week's Torah portion, warns us against this. Rabbeinu Bachya points out that this first line might have used the form of the verb, kush reish bet, in a form behikri bam, which would have meant when they, meaning Nadav and Avihu, performed an act or an offering, meaning when they made a sacrifice. This then might have been understood to be no different than any other korban that we might read about in the Torah. But instead it said bikorvatam, which means when they came close. Same root, slightly different form. This is sort of the joy and the crazy making of Hebrew to figure out what it means in each moment. But the implication here is that Nadav and Avihu somehow came too close and were tried to come close maybe in a moment when coming close was unwelcome. So the priests must learn as they're moving through and they're getting all of their instructions to perform each ritual in a particular way and also in its own time, recognizing that there is a time and a place for each. And when taken together over the course of an entire year, we can ensure that we're nurturing holiness in our community and also bringing us all closer to God. But we can't get so hung up on the idea of ecstasy, of coming close to God, that we forget to live the day-to-day. While it is possible to elevate the spiritual quality of every moment in our lives, it seems that it is also possible to denigrate spirituality of a moment so that it no longer has any impact and transformational power we desire if we are only so focused on that. Torah teaches that we need to balance these two. If we want to experience the holy, then sometimes we also need to let the mundane just be mundane. For our Israelite ancestors, they had a clear system for how it is that they would come close to God. And though it's unclear what they were feeling or thinking when they were going through these motions, I hope that being a part of this larger system, of being a part of this larger community, somehow brought them comfort and perhaps a sense of security. For them, this carefully balanced sacrificial system was the core of their system of spiritual practice. But the question remains, so what does it mean for us to find spiritual closeness? We who sit here generations removed from the entire sacrificial system, we don't do that anymore. So what is the core of our spiritual life? Is it prayer? Is it meditation? Is it being sort of somehow physical and in our bodies? Is it spending time learning or gathering in community? Or maybe even experiencing moments of silence? We learn in Psalm 145, Karov Hashem l'chol korav, l'chol asher yikra'uhu ve'emet. Hashem, source of life, spirit of all, God, is close to all who call out, to all those who call out in truth. The spiritual practice that should be at the core is the one we can express with the most authenticity, with our deepest truth. That practice might be different for each of us, or it might even be different in different moments. But as a shul, I hope that we can create diverse opportunities for this engagement so that every one of our members has the opportunity to feel this transcendence, this awe, and that sense of wonder that we each described that comes when we achieve that closeness. I hope that we can continue this conversation that we started tonight of when we have each had these spiritual experiences, when we have had them within the context of Jewish community, when we've had them here at BTBJ, when we've had them out in the world, wherever it is that we might find ourselves, and the increased opportunities that we would like to create for more such moments here together. And in the meantime, I want to invite all of you to also really appreciate each time a spiritual moment occurs. Since as we learn in our Parsha, not every single moment is destined to be one in which can kind of bring us karov la'adonai, close to God. Sometimes we also just need to sit in the carpool line. Sometimes we just need to answer some emails. Sometimes we might just need to clean our room. But when those moments of closeness do occur, I really want to invite you to notice them, to appreciate them, and to let them feed you and inspire you until, God willing, the next time. Shabbat Shalom. All right, so Sophia, come on back up. And Sophia is going to lead us in Kiddush.
Brachatana Elohim El Chalam, Borei Puri Hagafen.
Amen.
Brachatana Elohim El Chalam, Asher Kicham B'mitzvotav V'ratzavanu, V'shabbat Kodsho B'yachava U'ratzon Hinhilanu, Zikaron L'ma'aseh V'reishit, Ki Hiyom Tehila L'mikrei Kodesh, Zecher L'tziat Mitzrayim. Kivanu v'charta, v'yotanu kidasha, mikol ha'amim, v'shabbat kodshecha, v'yachava u'ratzon, hinhaltanu, brachat Adonai mikadesh ha'shabbat.
Amen.
We turn now to page 63, as we are currently in a period of counting the Omer, of counting the days from the second night Seder all the way to Shavuot. And so I want to invite you to count with me. And so we can find the kind of preamble and the blessing on page 63, and our counting will be on page 65, and we'll be doing the last one on that page when we get to the actual counting. And so there's a melody that I've been sharing that was written by Rabbi Yosef Goldman that I would love for us to do. So it takes some of the words from the preamble, Hineni Muchan and Zuman. Feel free to sing along if you can, and then we'll move into the blessing itself, and then we'll move on to the counting. Hineni Muchanu Mezuman Lekayem Mitzvah Taseh. Hineni Muchanu Mezuman Lekayem Mitzvah Taseh. Shel Sfirat HaOmer, Shel Sfirat HaOmer, Shel Sfirat HaOmer, Shel Sfirat HaOmer, Sheva Shabbatot, Temimot Tiena, Sheva Shabbatot, Temimot Tiena, Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu, b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu, al sfirat haomer, al sfirat haomer, al sfirat haomer, al sfirat haomer. Page 65. Hayom arba'a asar yom shehem shnei shavuot la'omer. Today is 14 days, 2 weeks of the Omer. And today we find ourselves, every week has a sort of emanation or spiritual quality of God, as does every day. So today we are in the week of Gevurah, of strength, and the day of Malchut, which is this sort of embodied, sort of very close connected experience of God in the world and in nature. And so we mark the intersection of both, and we can explore how the sort of rigid boundaries of Gevurah might intersect with the ways in which we connect with the earth, in which we experience ourselves on this planet, the ways in which these boundaries might sometimes be helpful to us, and the ways in which sometimes they might get in the way of the way in which we might want to be experiencing ourselves or the way that we exist on the planet. And so each day is sort of a chance for us to kind of notice and grow, hopefully, as we move throughout these 7 weeks. We continue on page 56 with Aleinu, and I invite you to rise if you're comfortable and able to do so.
Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, l'ateit gedula liotzer breshit, shalo asanu v'goyeh ha'aretza, v'lo samanu k'mishpachot ha'adama, shalo samchakenu v'chem, v'gor aleinu kechol hamona, v'anachnu korim, u'mishachavim u'modim, livnei melech malchei hamlachim, hakadosh baruch hu, v'ne'emar, v'chaya Adonai, l'melech al kol ha'aretz, bayom hahu, yiyeh Adonai echad, u'shemo echad.
You may be seated. We turn to page 58 for Kaddish Yatom Mourners Kaddish. And this week in our community, we are observing the yard sites of Lorraine Barrel, Dr. Cyril Bloom, Molly Cohen, Isaac Forstater, Nathaniel Harris, Rose Jacobson, Leslie Kaufman, Bessie Lampert, William Mishkin, Albert Schwartz, Eleanor Stander, Miriam Ruth Block, Louis Brillman, Benjamin Eisner, Rose Glickman, Dorothy Iglesias, Herman Cana, Theodore Kaufman, Paul Leopold, Benedict Nason, and Helen Schwartz. And we also send our condolences to Steve Gallup and his family on the loss of their father and our longtime member, Herb Gallup. Are there other names that folks would like to share of someone for whom you're saying Kaddish this evening? Okay. I'll invite those who are in mourning or who are reciting Kaddish to please rise, along with all those for whom it might be your custom to rise in the support of mourners, especially as we come out of celebrating Yom HaShoah this past Wednesday. And we know that unfortunately there's so many folks who perished in the Holocaust who have no one to say Kaddish for them. Yitzkadal v'yitzkadash shemei rabbah bi'alma divra kirutei bi'al malchutei v'chaye hon u'v'yomei hon u'v'chaye dechol beit Yisrael ba'agala u'bizman kari v'imru amen. Yehei shmei rabba mevarach li'olam l'omei almaya yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yitaleh v'yithalal shemei d'kudasha brichu le'ela minkol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechamata da'amiran v'yalma v'imru amen. Yehei shlomo rabba min shemaya v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. You're the one who creates peace on high, bring peace to us, to all Israel, and to all who dwell on earth, and we say together, amen. Whew. Tomorrow morning, we'll be back here again. Woohoo! At 9:30 to celebrate Shabbat and to celebrate as Sophia becomes bat mitzvah. And many of us will be back here again on Sunday for our big gala event, the Amazing Jews of Broadway and Beyond. I hear we closed registration, but then we may have opened it again. So if you didn't sign up but you really want to come, Val says no. You can, we'll tell you all about it on Monday.
As someone who has been a part of all the rehearsals, it is going to surely be an event.
Yeah.
That will
So-
be pretty amazing.
I'm looking forward to really just being able to be with our community again. And I know how hard our performers have worked, how hard Alan Blumenthal has worked. And so it's going to be quite a treat. If you saw the last one, you know you're in for a treat. So there's lots of great things coming up at BTBJ. So if you want to join us again, please do so to learn, to pray, whatever it is. And we will end our service this evening with the priestly blessing on page 75 and then also motzi. So for those of us who are staying for dinner with the Danas, then we'll be ready to go. Okay, so on page 75, we have a tradition to bless our loved ones on Friday night. So if you have loved ones near you that you would like to send blessings to, if you want to put your arms around them, all is welcome or not. If you have loved ones that you're thinking about who are not in this room, then picture them and send your love to them as well.
Yevarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha.
May God bless you and protect you.
Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'chunecha.
May God's face give light to you and show you favor.
Yisar Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom.
May God's face be lifted toward you and bestow upon you peace. Ken Nihirat Zon. May it be God's will. Be who you are and be blessed in all that you are and all that you will become.
Amen.
Danas, would you like to come help lead us in motzi? Is it still in the bag? It's still in the bag.
Sure. These are very teeny, Allison.
Oh, that was okay. Got it? Okay.
Oh, up high. Like the Lion King.
We give thanks to God for bread. Our voices join in song together as our prayer is humbly said. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen.
Te'avon. Shabbat shalom, everyone.
Shabbos.
Can't move it.